Excellent. Thanks, Sunil, for taking the time to come and talk to us. And I'm sure we're going to gain a lot from your background and experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh. Thank you to the students and faculty here. So I'm happy to be here and have the opportunity to talk a little bit about blockchain, supply chain, and I would like to make it interactive. I did create a few slides where we can maybe kind of set a little bit of understanding on what blockchain means and maybe look at some of the problems in supply chain that could potentially be solved by leveraging blockchain technology. You can see my screen now, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So blockchain as a technology got me interested maybe about 5 years back. Okay? And done a research report for one of our large consulting companies. And we used to provide a lot of research analysis for those big companies. And we did a research report on enterprise blockchain. There were a couple of things that stood out to us at the time, that Gartner had predicted a $3.1 trillion of business value to be created by 2030. And Gartner had also predicted that there will be at least a $10 billion company created in this space of blockchain. In 2017, I was invited to create a company in the blockchain space focused on enterprises. And we spent 2.5 years looking at the space. There was a lot of initial coin offerings, a lot of stuff going on in the crypto world. We did not want to get involved with it. We were enterprise focused. We wanted to create value for enterprises. And in 2019, we actually formulated a company around the thesis of what we call middleware, or as one of our founders called it, APG for blockchain. Okay? APG, about 10 years or so back, had built a company that was around the idea of connecting enterprise applications with the e-commerce that was happening in the web. And that applications framework allowed APG to basically translate API gateways between enterprises and public web. They became very, very successful because the SAPs and the Oracles and the mainframes, it was not easy to make changes to those infrastructure. But when you could write an API that could interact with the external world, it just became easy to translate that. Okay? So that was kind of the thesis behind why we came into this world. So the question, and there are a few things that we looked at blockchain and said, let's look at what's blockchain technology. Okay? First and foremost, it's a distributed database. Each party, component, or a member of a blockchain, they all have a consistent, updated version, and they have an access to the entire transaction history. Unlike a traditional database, this maintains history of all transactions. Okay, and it does it with peer-to-peer transmission. You can do it directly without any central authority. Okay, the biggest thing here with blockchain technology is that once you write something, it cannot be changed. So this is called immutability. So it is an updated, distributed, linked to previous transaction. It's a permanent ledger distributed to everybody else. Another interesting aspect of it is all the participants on a blockchain have visibility provided you have the right access. Okay? There are different types of blockchain. We'll get into that, but it is transparent. So this is why you saw recently this couple was arrested for $3 billion. They stole 120,000 bitcoins, which they tried to launder in many different ways, but the authorities were able to trace them because it is a public ledger. It is quite transparent. Okay? Now, a very interesting aspect of blockchain technology is the ability to do what they call smart contracts. Smart contracts are nothing more than simple, if this condition happen, then do this, else do something else. Okay? And it's a set of those programmable logic and arbitrary logic that can be automated, enforced based on prior agreements between people. So when you do supply chains, you look at purchasing, business-to-business transactions. These are all based on agreements and processes. You have the opportunity to look at all these boundaries between people and entities and look at, can I automate some of this process in a consistent fashion where everybody who agrees to that agrees to the common truth. Right? So if you look at the technology a little bit deeper, let me go in the forward direction. Okay. The technology has been around for decades. Okay. The blockchain is simply a chain of blocks. In the computer science parlance, is a data structure called a linked list that is connecting one block to another block. Okay? It is completely open. What they do with it is a little bit different. Okay? What they do is they take some data from a block, they run it through what's known as a hash. It's a little computational process that is a little difficult to compute, but is easy to verify that computation is correct. So they call it a hash. They include the hash of the previous block in it, and then create a list. Okay? So let's look at a chain of 3 blocks. I start off with what's called a genesis block. My previous hash is 0, is starting with a null pointer, and I have a hash for that block. I connect it to the second block. Now the second block has a hash to the previous block. I have a new hash, and the new hash is now connected to the third block, and I have a new hash for third block. This is what makes Bitcoin a technology that is very difficult to counterfeit. Because what happens is, once you get in, and you have a block that is connected to another block for 5, 6 feet, it's really difficult to make those changes afterwards and figure out where those changes happen. Okay? In fact, I was lucky to meet the inventor of blockchain technology, a gentleman called W. Scott Stern. He was supposed to co-author the blockchain book that we wrote. Unfortunately, he fell sick with COVID at the time. So when Scott and Stuart Haber worked for Belcore, and they published this paper in 1991, the key problem they tried to solve was immutability of timestamps. If you take a computer and you create a document on the computer, then you send it to your friend changes the clock on the computer to maybe a year older or some other date that is older. They make some changes to the document. And if they claim that document is the original document, you have no way to prove it is otherwise. So the solution they came up was, we will multiple copies of this document, we will hash them, and we'll connect them together like this. And the more blocks you hash and connect, it becomes really, really hard to reverse, especially when you bring in public key, private key encryption to make this thing happen. Satoshi Nakamoto used this idea in 2008 and added an incentive mechanism for people to create these blocks running, these networks running, to verify this. And those incentives were known as Bitcoin. And that's what's created this whole ecosystem today. Now, separation from crypto and Bitcoin, the underlying technology has value in many different ways. Okay? So let's apply that technology into the supply chain. Okay, and you guys are all going to be working in related spaces. Some of the problems that you see in supply chain space. Number one, the data in a supply chain is very, very opaque. Okay, so when you see these issues like the chip shortage, you see the container shortage. Okay. When you see people unable to get stuff on time, right? There are fundamental reasons why that happens. A lot of it has to do with lack of visibility for data, lack of data in the right place, and because of the way supply chains are built. So we will kind of come to the solutions later. But if you were to leverage blockchain technology for it, you can enable collaboration between different parties and in a trustless environment. I don't need to trust somebody because the math of the code is trustworthy. Okay? So we can actually connect the dots from order to visibility in retail. We can even do additional things like supply chain finance, and we can go deep tier supply chain and across the whole value chain. Typically, if you take an auto manufacturer or large industrial manufacturer, an OEM like a Ford or Caterpillar or any of those big companies, let's say you buy a car, that car manufactured by Ford will have many, many components in it. And the manufacturer might get an engine from a tier 1 supplier. The engine might have certain sub-assemblies in it that they get from a tier 2 supplier. Within that, there may be some circuit boards that comes from a tier 3 or a system that comes from a tier 3 supplier. Within those, there may be some chips that come from a semiconductor manufacturer, a tier 4 or tier 5. So these supply chains can run 5 or 10 tiers deep. And the OEM really doesn't know who is beyond tier 1, because tier 1 does not really want to tell you who the tier 2s are, because people are afraid that you will come around them, you'll squeeze for pricing, you will bypass you. So all of this stuff happens in the supply chain, right? So because of that, people have to basically share information between parties. So if I'm a tier 4 or tier 5 supplier, I will spread my data to my tier 4. They will remove all my identifying data, aggregate into their data, and then send it to the next guy, to tier 3, who do it to tier 2 and tier 1, and so on and so forth, right? It is a human process. Unfortunately, many of the supply chains still running on Excel spreadsheets and email and EDI. Okay? There isn't a single centralized source of doing this because nobody trusts each other. Okay? So that's one of the problems that we face in supply chains. Okay? And because of this disconnect between parties, you end up with different silos of data. So you have complete lack of traceability across this, unless you have massive control over your entire supply chain. And in fact, 80–90% of a supply chain is outside the four walls of the enterprise. And if you look at SAP or any ERP system, they are by definition enterprise resource planning systems. Those systems do not have any idea about who their suppliers are. They might be extended to supply chain management systems and can include your tier 1, but there's no way to know who is in tier 2 because you don't even know who they are. They're not telling you, right? So when you start looking at some of the traceability problems like food recall, okay? Let's say Walmart has to recall spinach, E. coli outbreak. Where did it come from? Where did it go? It comes from a farm. From the farms, it gets triple washed spinach, goes through some processing facility, gets packaged, put in a temperature controlled truck, moved to a warehouse. From the warehouse, it goes to a distributor. From the distributor, it gets to Walmart. From the retail store, you come and buy and you take it home. So now we have this recall. Every one of these participants, they have multiple systems in there. They have SAP, they have Oracle, they have warehouse management systems, they have transportation management systems. You don't know where stuff came from or where it went. Only thing you know that the retail point of sale, we know that some transactions happened. We don't know who came in and bought. You might have paid cash to buy something. You might have bought it on a credit card. Maybe they got your loyalty rewards information. That situation, you really don't know what happened. Okay? It used to take about 2 weeks per store for Walmart to do this. And when they implemented Food Trust jointly with IBM, they were able to bring it down to 7 seconds flat once they connected the dots. Okay? The other challenges that we see is, and in fact, I was reading this article today, organic cotton from India. This article was shared, and there was a lot of fraud happening inside the organic cotton industry. So we are buying organic food. How do we know exactly organic? We are actually trusting the brands. The brands are trusting the certification process. The certification process happens once a year. And people go and supposed to take soil samples and get the data. Who knows if the data has been tampered with or not the so audit process is properly done or not, right? So those are some of the other issues. The third challenge here is because of all of this stuff, we have lack of trust. And when you take something like a smart contract, you can actually make it automated, and trust is provided because there is evidence with visibility, and we can do this with much lower impact, and you can have create more goodwill with that. Okay? Because people, when you share some data, you are able to improve the overall efficiency of the supply chain. Okay? So when you look at the supply chain logistics, etc., you have inventory shortage is obviously a challenge that we see in the headlines. So we need to be able to get into deep tier visibility for better inventory data. If I want to do a damage return, now I need to have reverse logistics runs backwards through all the way to the manufacturer. So I need to be able to do invoice reconciliation, figure out where the damage happened. Did it happen during the trucking segment? Did it happen at the customer side? Did it happen in the factory segment? How do you bring a degree of automation to that? How do you make sure that the vaccine was supposed to be maintained at a certain temperature, or the meat was supposed to be maintained within a freezer temperature? You can bring in data from IoT sensors and other tools like that, and you can automate the rules around it. Okay? Any questions so far? Before I go into some examples and use cases.
Yes, go ahead.
So you did mention that there would be like participants in a blockchain who would like validate the data to make sure the transaction is like a good one. Who are these individuals that we're like referring to? Are they like other companies, or are they other like just individuals who are sitting behind computers validating transactions? I guess that's where I'm having a hard time connecting the dots there.
Great question. Great question. Let us understand how brands create trust today. Okay? And let's take organic food, for example. Anything that is sold as organic in US has to be certified by USDA. Regardless of whether it is sourced in China or India or Mexico, it has to be certified by USDA. Okay? Now, how does USDA go to these other countries and certify it? They don't, right? What they do is they have certain organizations that are certifying authorities. In the case of textiles, there is Global Organic Textile Society. In the case of latex, there is Global Organic Latex Society, right? And there are companies like Control Union, OneCert, EcoCert. What they do is go to the farms and they will take soil samples. They will collect some data, and some of the data they collect, for example, you might be licensed to produce, let's say, 10 tons of certain material. Now, they will collect the data around how much was produced, how much was sold. And they will reconcile this data to see, did 10 become 12 or 20, right? Did my neighbor give you some data, right? So there is some process that goes around with human verification to make sure the certification is valid, right? And when you automate with technology, some of these processes have to be followed. And you can automate and you can speed things up. You can have a workflow that people can sign off. And technology by itself is not smart enough to figure things out. Okay. Good question.
Any other questions?
Okay. So I talked a little bit about the OEM example. And in this particular example, we're talking companies of the size of Caterpillar and Ford and people like that. Okay. In those kind of networks, you might have 1 million plus SKUs that go into a big tractor or a heavy industrial equipment. Okay? You have thousands of suppliers across 5 to 10 years, 10 to years. And you have 100+ manufacturing plants. And even with large products, you have a lot of products that are coming in, right? So given that the OEM does not really have more than 1,000 or 1,500 suppliers in the first year, it's impossible for them to really have complete visibility across this. Beyond 15-20%, they don't have visibility. Okay, so by bringing a shared infrastructure using blockchain as a mechanism, we are able to give a easy to write information, easy to read information, provided we address the privacy concerns. Okay? People don't want to see their competitors' information. So we actually have a framework where we encrypt the data and make sure that access is only given to the people who are supposed to have access, and the owners of the data control who gets to see that information, right? So what we're doing is we're simplifying this process for allowing information to flow in real time. So that's one example. Here is a different use case. It's a small manufacturer. So the other one was a large Fortune 100 company. Here's a small manufacturer. Okay? They make custom poker tables. Okay? These tables get shipped over land using trucks. And they had a couple of problems that they faced. One, the trucks sometimes things get damaged during transportation. People handle things carelessly. And then when the customer receives it, the table's damaged, it's broke, something happened, etc. Okay? Now, if the customer says this happened, invariably the carrier says it's not my fault. It was either damaged when you gave it to me, or it is damaged by the customer. Okay? So we don't know who caused it. Okay? That's one type of problem. Okay? The damage attribution is important because if it is the carrier's problem, then their insurance company is supposed to pay for it. If it's the manufacturer's problem, the manufacturer voluntarily is supposed to fix it. And if it's a customer mishandled it, then it's up to the manufacturer to work with the customer to see how they want to support that scenario, right? Now, there is also a second problem that we noticed. What we noticed was the carriers usually would quote for moving this furniture. They would say it costs $200. Okay? When we actually looked at the invoices that came from this, we started seeing a curious pattern. There were several carriers they were using, and invariably the quote and the actual invoice were different by consistently between 13 to 15%. They were getting overcharged 13 to 15%. Okay. Now, if you're smart enough to notice it or you're on it, and it's hard to trace this because your quote came a few weeks back, invoice comes a few weeks after deployment. How do you tie the things together? They are in different systems. They're coming from different places. You may or may not have the systems that put everything in one place. So the bigger companies might have SAP and they might have things in their place and they can reconcile, but your invoice may not identify what was in the original code and may not tie them together. Right? So there's manual work involved. Okay? So it only depends on how good your people who are in receiving an API are in terms of how well the documentation is done. So what we looked at is, and if you actually noticed it and then you went and asked the carrier will basically say that your dimensions are wrong. Your volume is different, your weight is different, your so whose version of truth is correct? That's a hard dispute, right? So what we did with this manufacturer was they already were keeping some evidence because they're having these issues. They were keeping some evidence into their CRM. We extended that by saying that keep videos, keep dimensions, keep weight, etc. And we put together a little simple overlay system that allowed them to record that information on the blockchain, put a QR code on it, and allow the customer as well as the carriers to scan the QR code. If there's any issues with the package they receive it, all you need to do is say, it's damaged, and then take some pictures, videos, upload it, you're done. Okay, will helps you activate the warranty. We even have a video how this is done on YouTube, done by the CEO of BBO Poker Tables, explaining people how to use it. So blockchain as a technology doesn't need to be hard technology to implement. It can be very simple application like this. All we're doing is sharing one common version of truth, and that allows people to interact with it. Okay, and we were able to go from having a lot of customer service kind of issues to over 90% customer satisfaction just by that simple thing. And it's a small manufacturer. It did not cost a lot of money for them to do it. Here is a more sophisticated use case. This is an organic mattress brand. They've grown tremendously in the last few years. And they claim to have vegan organic mattresses, and that is how they've been selling. They've been selling direct to consumer. They have grown rapidly in the last few years. One of the challenges they faced was the competitors were selling a lot cheaper, and they were also claiming organic. So the question is, how do you, and they've actually sent a team of people to Himalayas in India where their sheep were being raised. There are about 200,000 heads of sheep that were roaming freely in the foothills of Himalayas. Their latex was coming from Guatemala and South India. And they were shipping it from different countries. They had different systems in each of these subcontractors who were providing these different things. The factory was in Los Angeles, and they were shipping it directly to the consumer from the factory. So the assembly was happening here, but there was no single source of truth. There was no single source of data. So what we did is, and knowing that you're dealing with small farmers who are mostly illiterate, you can't really go and put a lot of technology in front of them. Don't expect them to start writing documents and things like that. They were used to writing things on pieces of paper at most. Okay? So when we start looking at the digitalization journey, we started working with things like mobile phones, cameras, and in places where they were roaming between India and Pakistan kind of border, there's no cell phone service. So we even had to deal with situations where there were avalanches and people have died because of that, etc. So the safety of the farmers was also one concern, right? So the environmental, social, governance parameters start coming into play. ESG is a big thing in many companies. So the question is, how do you take these data that you as a company are putting a lot of effort into making sure is happening, then how do you communicate in a way that your customers can actually understand that you're doing what it's supposed to do, while others may not be, and how can you raise the quality of your brand, right? So we started collecting data from each stage, at the farm stage, at the cleaning stage, certification stage, the materials being used, no chemicals being used, all of the information we were tracking. We were tracking the movement from the trucks to the ships, the containers, and then at each of the factories with videos and images and other data, connecting the dots and putting it in a very simple story that helps you tell the brand story. Okay? With a QR code on the mattress that allows you to pull up the information associated with the mattress that you brought, which lot, what went into that lot, who actually contributed to putting that in a way that is simple enough for people to grok, but deep enough for a regulator to verify that this information has been put in, signed off by authorized parties, people's identities are known, that the signatures are validated, and that information is available for people to check off, right? So that way the regulators get a much better digitalized process. The consumers get a simple understanding that this brand is going above and beyond. And then the company gets a digitalized process that eliminates a lot of the paperwork and the emails and the conversations that go back and forth when stuff fails. Right? So that is another way of building these mini applications on top of blockchain technology. So what you're really doing is when you start connecting the dots from farm to table or farm to customer, you are basically connecting from the farm with the production, the process, the manufacturing, with the intermediate certifications, through purchasing, through shipping and receiving, with manufacturing. Imagine each of these are different companies, and every company might have multiple systems, one for finance, one for shipping, one for transportation. They'll have different systems. So by blockchain is basically acting as that shared layer for people to share data across that is relevant to other people. And we actually don't want to put too much data on the blockchain. We only want to put the data verification signatures on the blockchain. And so we have a mechanism to share that across. And we do it with simple APIs. So your SAP can use it with any full stack developer can use our APIs in maybe 2-3 hours of programming work. Okay? It's simple read, write, and verify, just like you don't think about the complexities of how Oracle runs the database. We just call SQL and we read and write, and information is there for us to retrieve. So by connecting the dots across this, we are now able to go all the way to the consumer feedback, and if they do returns, recalls, these rails are connected back and forth, and we can even give them loyalty rewards points. We can incentivize them to put a review on the web. We can give them some bonuses. We understand the customer buying patterns. So there's a lot more possible when you have a connected ecosystem. Before I get into looking at other use cases, let me stop and see you have other questions.
Any other questions? Jamie? Yes.
I just had a clarifying question. So you mentioned like how there are only like certain bits and pieces of information that is shared on the blockchain. So there's not any kind of like pricing thing on the blockchain. So you can't see the details of each transaction. So that's because I guess like my question is like, so if a competitor were to go into the blockchain to see what's like their competitors like information is, they wouldn't be able to see that because that would be like encrypted information, correct?
Yeah, and it's a great question. One of the reasons why the technology has been in this early stages of coming together is because people have those kind of concerns. If I come onto your network, will my competitors see my data?
Right.
And there are all situations where competitors don't even want to see the fact that you're actually doing something with somebody else. Okay.
Right.
So it's not just encrypting the data, but you also want to be able to share data in a way that nobody really sees, right? So, so we came up with this. So initially we came up with this layer 2 mechanism that allowed us to read and write onto any blockchain. So you don't have to think about blockchain technology. All the hosting, cloud, etc. is kind of hidden from you, right? You don't have to worry about it. It's service. Above that, we came up with a security layer that allowed people to encrypt it and manage. The key management also is managed by that. And then we made the data opaque in a new technology called zero knowledge proof. So the way to understand that is if you were to go to a bar and ask for a drink, they ask you for an ID. Your ID has your name, your date of birth, your address, and other stuff. But is it really relevant to the bartender? All they need to know is, are you over 21 or not? Right? So if you have a technology that says, yes, I'm over 21, you really don't need to share the other details in that. Right? So imagine a similar kind of technology allows us to pass information between participants. So we can go across, know that the information is valid to the people who have the rights to see that information, and nobody else sees that.
And then I guess like, sorry, just quickly, one other question. So within a blockchain, so like in a supply chain, right? Is that you can also like set it to where it encrypts like information between like, so you talked about from the farms all the way to the actual selling and retailing of a product. You don't want like people even within your own supply chain to see each individual like margin, because then they will be like, well, I'm giving it to you and then you're selling it for $50 extra. that's not very fair. So you can encrypt that information, or would that information within the same supply chain still have to be public?
Right. So this is an important point, actually. In the traditional system, in the databases, right? What happens is all the bytes are in one database under somebody's control, one person's control. So invariably, maybe database administrator, somebody has access to that information. Perhaps they have access rights and encryption and things like that, but still it's under the control of one entity. Here, we believe in the data being held with the owner of the data. So the owner of the data can dictate who gets to see the data. So you own the data, it is decentralized, it's with you, then you can share it with other people. And you can say, hey, so-and-so gets to see this information, somebody else only sees this other bit of information, not this piece of information. And these kind of technologies have to be built. And the technology is in a stage where these are getting built. So it's not like it's all available and popular. But once this technology starts getting built and these kind of problems get solved, then you will see that people start just using it. Cool.
I mean, this is such an important, especially, Sunil, when you're walking through the returns operations. I was thinking, even getting back to, I remember in my automotive days, we used to say, somebody was driving a truck, and there was, he thought there was an airbag inside, but there was no airbag inside, because after the whole thing happened, when they opened it up, there was a bunch of shoes inside. And I mean, things like that happen in the aftermarket world. Okay, yes. I'm not talking about brand new vehicles produced by GM, or these are the ones which are going through workshops and other mechanics and all that stuff, and even some of them they go to Mexico and other places. And to Sunil's point, I mean, if you track all these products and you get a system where you can come back and say the OEM knows what is in that truck, right? What are the parts that has been replaced? And then, for maintenance and stuff like that, this is like huge impact. I mean, you can actually even alert people saying, this something is going to fail, and you can actually take it to the right dealerships, and you can even tell them where to go, because you might be close to a place where you can fix it. There's so many benefits. You're looking at revenue streams. There's cost opportunities, taking cost out of the process, plus safety, big time. Safety is huge as well. I mean, to the other point which Sunil brought up about the returns coming back, and he said you had to, they had to actually take pictures and videos and upload themselves. I worked in the returns operation. We had to, these boxes will come in. The same point he raised about who is at fault. Is it the transporter, or is it the customer themselves? So the box showed up. This is for the telecom industry. Or it might be somebody within the plant who actually used the forklift and damaged it. That could have happened also, because the stuff comes in, and so these are the different steps. So there are various methods we were looking at. We were using QV scan technologies to scan the box from 6 sides, take pictures of that. Then once it comes through this conveyor down, they will open it up, look for any damage inside these are cell phones and stuff like that. So they look for any water damage, anything like that. If it's completely water damage, they will immediately inform saying it's customer abuse. So there were several steps in the process. If you look at the returns operations, it was so complex. And Motorola, Samsung, Apple, everybody was cluttering around this whole thing, trying to figure out what went wrong with my device, right? They were not saying, I don't care. They want to know. They want to really know, so that whatever is coming back, they can fix it. So that next time, if it's within the 14-day warranty period, they can actually make sure their sales don't get affected. So they can fix it immediately. So there's so many benefits I can see with this tracking mechanism. And I was kind of puzzled about this trustless word which you used, Sunil.
Yes.
We say trustless environment.
Yes.
Everybody caught on to that, what we meant by trustless? What did you catch? What was your thought? Anybody else? I know Jamie knows. Who else? What is a trustless environment he's talking about? He said trustless. I cannot trust anyone. So there's this outside, kind of, in the sense like the system will provide that trust. It's trustworthy. So even if you are in a trustless environment, in a sense, the other people are not trustworthy, your system is supporting that trust. Did I say it correctly, Sunil?
Yes, and I actually ask a related question. When you hear the word truth, what does it mean to you?
Something I can rely on.
Okay, that's good. Okay, and how do you know to rely on that?
Because it's been proven.
Because it's been proven. How has it been proven?
So my study based on previous records and performances
Of previous records and performances of what?
system.
Of the system. I mean,
Okay, so some kind of history. Okay, so consistency.
Understanding between two parties.
two parties. So do you trust the other guy, right? I mean,
Depends
whether
on-
he's trying to say the truth or not.
It depends on your history between the other parties.
You might trust him, but is he telling you the truth?
That comes over a period of time.
Does he always tell the truth?
He's saying that it take time before.
And because before trust becomes truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now contrast that with the question: when you hear the word fact, what does it mean to you?
Supported by data.
Say that again. I couldn't hear that.
If it's like supported by data, so like the scientific method or like proven multiple times to be the exact same.
Give me an example of a universal fact.
Newton's law.
Okay, good one. That's a good one. That's gravity, right? So there are certain things that we all hold to be fact based on observations or whatnot. Truth is more nuanced. Truth is more on agreement between parties. I believe, you believe, right? We agree on that as our common truth, right? And a consistent behavior of a certain number of truths, we can say, oh, I trust that guy, right? But all business happens based on trust. If your relationships are built on trust, then you can make decisions much faster. When you have zero trust, then it's hard to have any kind of decision made, right? So this trustless environment, we are basically saying that you are able to have the mathematics of making sure the data hasn't changed, allows you to not have to worry about that piece. You're not dependent on a brand representing it a certain way. End of the day, what is a brand after all? It's a consistent behavior that you can believe in and you can go back and every time, right? So it's the entire organization that performs to a certain promise. That's the brand. So similarly, when you have a system that can give you mathematically something that cannot be changed, then I can use that as a substitute for trust, provided I have a good mechanism to put good data into the system. Because if I don't, then I not only have garbage in, garbage out, I have garbage forever. Right? I can never remove it, right? So when we see this NFT explosion that is happening today, I can take a JPEG and create an NFT out of it. I can take another JPEG and then create another NFT out of it. How do I know this NFT is valuable, right? And how do I know it's not a fake? So the true value comes in if you can couple provenance. This is the authenticity of who created it. Is it the real artist who created it, right? What happened to the original picture and what is the history attached to it? When you can attach history, then people value it more. The technology allows you to make sure that there isn't a second copy, that this is the only copy, this is the original copy. The technology also allows you to add other benefits like royalties and ownership transfers. All of this can be automated. But the reason Mona Lisa is valued highly is in the Paris Louvre Museum, where it is hanging. People have agreed that that is the original Mona Lisa, right? A Mona Lisa that you buy off the street will not have the same value, because in the digital world, you can copy something for literally zero cost. So the uniqueness is what blockchain technology is allowing you to create, and that is what is allowing you to create the value. But we have to really focus on making sure that that data you're putting in is trustworthy. And you have to be at least at the same standards as certification process to be able to do that.
I mean, the other point, Sunil, is like you have the data, the system is working, the truth is there, the data is actually correct, right? But still, you know, in companies, what you see is like people question that, right?
Yes.
They will say like, I don't agree with it. You know,
Yes.
to go to different functional areas. I think that's where this consensus-based mechanisms, right, which
Yes.
you have within blockchain is providing that there's an agreement
Yes.
that happens between parties. Now you cannot question anything. It's solid.
Correct. So, and we can have our shared truth, which may be very different from a different community's version of truth. But for us, the consensus allows us to operate.
No, there's no question. There's consensus, there's truth. So nobody can question the authority of that. People have agreed to it already, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember, the one thing I remember when we talked about that was we used to publish an on-time report for our shipments.
Mm-hmm.
And we trusted it. That data was accurate.
Yes.
From our perspective.
Yes.
But a lot of functional areas did not agree with that.
Yes.
They will have one or two instances of bad experience. They will say like, I don't agree with these guys. What are they saying? They're saying 98% on time. I don't agree.
Yes.
Right. So you have to, so how do you, so the consensus is also equally important along with the data where it's coming from, the truth. And blockchain is such a technology that really combines both together.
Yeah. That's the power of it. When you can create this consensus and trust, and you can leverage technology to make that happen, then that eases up a lot of the other stuff that happens, all of those friction that happens between multi-party transactions. You can make it much more trustworthy. Okay? The other benefit of doing it this way is that once you digitalize something, today you have no way to trust anything that is digital. That is why we have lost faith in news. You can create fake news. You can create fake videos, right? So if you want to take some power back, then you have to create a much more trusted framework. So let's look at some possible use cases in the retail environment. You are familiar with marketplaces, Amazon, eBay, etc. And what if you could create a blockchain-enabled marketplace that is more trustworthy? Okay, where when you buy something, things are actually kept in escrow. And when you make the payment, the other party can release the digital good or the physical goods to you. And when it is delivered and signed off, the payment can be released, right? So just think in terms of some of the issues that we see today, counterfeit products. The Louis Vuitton bag that you bought for $1,500 or the Rolex watch that you have, how do you know it is real? How do you know if it is fake? The authorized distributor for Rolex can open it up and they can see certain things inside that allows them to verify in the system that allows you to do. But how does an average consumer know that it is real or fake, right? And there are ways to connect the dots using serial numbers, using QR codes, using barcodes to be able to scan and verify into the real systems and bring that information together, right? That's possible. That's one possible application. How do you track inventory? I have warehouses all over the place. I have different factories. How do you even know if somebody is stealing stuff from these places, right? So you need to have some kind of end-to-end visibility. Return goods, we kind of touched upon that. How do you get the return goods back? And I was talking to one large furniture retailer. They're $10–15 billion in size. The cost of returns is 6 to 8%. 6 to 8% of what is sold comes back to you. So if you're a $10 or $15 billion company, we're dealing with hundreds of millions of losses associated with the returns. If I have a blockchain-enabled loyalty program as opposed to a standard loyalty program, I can earn points in American Airlines and I can redeem in United Airlines. If I don't have enough points to redeem my flight on Southwest Airlines, I could use my United points or my Marriott points, and then I could combine that. If I own those points and it's in my system, if it is locked up in their system, then I don't have a way to do that. So when you start combining resources to open up these ecosystems, now you have the power to create exponential advantage, not only for the consumers, but also for the businesses who participate in it, because I have more places where people will use my points, right? These are some retail use cases. Let's look at some manufacturing use cases. Contract management between suppliers, right? And these are notoriously inefficient. What happens today? People sign contracts, they send them back and forth, one word, lawyers get involved, your multiple people from your companies get involved. Finally, you sign, you create a PDF, and the document is put somewhere. How do you know the supplier KPIs and enforcement of those policies are a completely different business process. The lawyers are not involved. They're not running your supply chain. So you have to now translate from a piece of document that is sitting in a legal system to something that is now operationally, the guy on the floor really doesn't care about the contract. The only thing he needs to know is I have a 24-hour SLA or a 4-hour SLA for that, right? So that information needs to be translated across the organization in a way that you can have a lot more efficient management and execution. Because if I have a contract I'm supposed to execute against, every person or entity within my organization who has to contribute towards, they really need to know their roles and their expectations out of those roles. So that's another way to share internally between parties. A digital thread can be a communication mechanism that, because one of the fundamental challenges that we have is silos, right? If I can have a certain information flow that cuts across the silos, now I can have a common digital thread that allows me to have a framework by using blockchain as opposed to a enterprise service bus or something else. We are allowing organizations inside and outside to share information in a very high-speed, real-time fashion. Tracking the production of the products, right? I need to know how much capacity do you have. I mean, we are recovering from COVID, and I need to know that I can actually make more cars. Ford ran into this problem where during COVID, they shut down a lot of lines and they told all the suppliers that they're reducing their production. Then the chip manufacturer, who were 4 or 5 years removed from the manufacturer, they got orders for consumer electronics, all the laptops and the TVs that people ordered, that started utilizing all of their available capacity. So when Ford figured out that there was a big demand for SUVs and the F-150 trucks, the chip manufacturers were not able to take that order because they were already 105, 110% capacity, and it takes 3 years to build a factory and $100 million, and they're providing a $1 capacitor or a resistor. It doesn't make sense for them to go invest that money just because the manufacturer was yanking them around in the last year, right? So how do I know who has the capacity? If not company A, can I find out who else has the capacity to do this? How do I redirect my resources to plan for supply chain changes up and down? So you need to have a connected fabric with trustworthy information. Okay, that's a different use case. Every one of these can become a network of its own with multiple applications driving it. Tracking maintenance, like Dr. Ramesh talked about this. How do I know the asset? It could be a big truck. It could be a bus with 1 million miles plus of driving history. How do you know that oil changes have been made on a regular basis? How do you know that the maintenance is being done properly, right? And that helps in maintaining the value. And if you buy a car and it has been dealer certified with a complete service record, every 3 months they change their oil and they go to the dealer to do everything, and you have complete history, you're going to value the car higher than a car that you don't know where it came from and it has changed hands 5 times, right? How do you know that the information that they shared is not been tampered with, or by having blockchain, it allows you to have that trustworthy information. Tracking the recall scenario, where did it come from, where did it go? We have had scenarios, for example, we have had food manufacturers go bust because somebody pulled out the entire supply chain and dumped it. And the farm it came from, the farm it went to, when the store it went to, are not the only ones who get affected, because food decays the moment it comes out, and it's perishable. So within a week or two, it goes bad anyway. So if there is a problem, it's easier for somebody to dump the entire source of supply, but then nobody gets paid, right? So those are some of the manufacturing use cases. Consumer goods, we touched upon tracking the provenance. Anything that is a brand item, that is really based on the provenance of the item, right? Where did it come from? What was the craftsmanship? Why do we value an iPhone a lot higher than a generic Android phone, right? Because we value the craftsmanship, we value the design that went into it, right? The change of ownership, we can track that. Any critical parameters that you want to couple. You can couple this with information coming from IoT or other environment parameters, and you can track those temperature changes during transit. You can look at the conditions of the assets, right? In a remote location that it's hard to get to. You can automatically collect data, and then you can analyze that data using artificial intelligence tools and data analytics tools to know that you're working on verified data. Now you can take large quantities of data and process it to look at the conditions of the asset. Regulators have the entire history. It's a lot easier for them to go to one place without having to do field visits. And if you know that the data has been secured, not tampered with, and has been handled in a compliant manner, then they can do spot visits. They don't have to do the traditional way, right? The warranty ownership, the genuineness of products. I'll give you one example. And before I go there, this is a few years back. I had an old Toyota Sienna, and I had like 200,000 miles on the car. And as I was getting on the freeway, I started seeing some smoke come out of the under the hood. So I went to the nearest service station. So I kind of coasted into the service station. The guy looked at it and he said, it's going to be like $600 to change it. Okay? Something, well, we're going to replace it with OEM parts and etc. Okay? So I just smiled. I called AAA, had the car towed straight to my mechanic that I trust. The guy kind of looked at it and he was laughing. Hey, this car has 200,000 miles on it. Who wants to put an OEM part on it? Who knows that the guy is actually going to put an OEM part on it, right? He just saw somebody in distress, or he had an opportunity to report somebody, right? And how many such things happen on a daily basis? I never gone back to that guy, and I never will go back to that guy, right? Because I lost trust in that. But a lot of people don't know this happens. Now, if you have a way to take this kind of information, and don't you think it'll be better than the 4-star, 5-star reviews that you see on Amazon? Right? This is just some examples there. Any questions? So I have one last slide. So this is a project that we are working on right now, and this particular company sells products, private label through some of the well-known brands, and food product. Okay? It has many ingredients that go into it. They have to verify multiple things. Okay? So this is some of the concerns that the customers have, the brands have. Is it fully organic? Are all the components composition in the right proportions? The freshness of the products, okay? How fresh is it? Is it free from pathogens, E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, etc.? Is it free from other impurities, metals, etc.? Right? Where did it come from? In this case, some of the items are sourced in China, some of them are sourced in India, some of them are sourced in Africa and Europe, different parts of the world. They're sold here in the US, right? Now, there are some concerns about counterfeits coming from some regions, China in this particular case, product recalls, product returns. Sustainability is an issue in some of these markets. They are concerned about social issues like forced labor concerns with the Uyghur population in northwest part of China. How do you assure your customers that you are not party to any forced labor, child labor, etc., when you don't even know where your suppliers are, where they're sourcing the material from? What is the governance framework for this? Right? So for the brand, how do you build the narrative and the customer conviction and the brand differentiation? So within blockchain, what we're proposing here, that all the data visibility, all partners share all the key data to a ledger directly, simplify data capture using cell phones with satellite pictures, with very basic information, data from IoT sensors, etc., with GPS codes for locations where it's coming from. Collect the data, including the employee payment information, salary, is it aligned with the normal salary for the region, etc. Verify that with other pay stubs, but not have to share that information outside, confidentiality wise. So we don't want to share that information, but we want to know that it's being done properly. The lab tests and the test results coming back, capturing the date and timestamp of all this information, verifying the proof of the custody chain, ownership, etc. So all of these business processes are happening today. Many of these business processes are happening today. They're happening. They have to do it because otherwise you can't do business with the big guy. But what blockchain allows us to do is to make sure the data cannot be tampered by anybody. Okay, number one. Number two, we are allowing people to share data with less effort than it would take otherwise. And so this multi-party relationship, we are able to now also put some smart contracts that says, you know what, we verified everything is good, and this is a supplier with a consistent track record. Perhaps they should get some higher incentives. The ones who comply can get a higher price than the ones who don't, right? So we have different mechanisms to do that. So we are basically taking all these ingredients, okay, and we're bringing them together in a very simple proposition. And you can actually see the product coming together, final brand where it is being positioned. So these are real things that are happening.
Fantastic. Questions about everything? Everybody understood the ESG compliance? Environmental, social, government compliance, it's becoming more and more critical now. You know, the awareness has increased with most people. I'm sure, how many of you are environmentally conscious now? The very few, okay. You don't see many hands. So, so I think the awareness within the industry has increased substantially. There's more importance given to that, and you know, I was just listening to Sunil's presentation, and many things are becoming, I mean, so important. I mean, the world is changing as we speak. I mean, you guys are going to go into a workforce which is completely different than, you know, what we all worked on. I mean, very different. dramatically different. It's not like, 10, 15 years ago, it was not this much of a change. So the expectations are going to be very different. And you're actually the knowledge, what you need to know is also quite different. Like all these things, how it applies, how it is going to change the industry. I know that many of you actually, how many of you had a little bit of familiarity with blockchain before? A little bit, okay. None of the other people had any exposure to blockchain. You never heard that, or okay. So maybe it was the first time hearing some of the students, and you guys are getting used to it. But did you learn a lot from this? Any questions?
I have a related question there. How many of you have had any exposure to crypto? Okay.
About it.
Who has heard about Bitcoin?
Okay.
Okay, that's interesting. How about Ethereum? Okay. So you can see the awareness is a little bit different. Bitcoin is a whole lot more known than Ethereum. It's a whole lot more than any other crypto, right? And the blockchain applications are a whole lot less, but they're all using the same technology. They're just different applications technology. So if you see what has been possible with Bitcoin, then that kind of things could be possible with all of this physical stuff that previously were blocked away in silos. When you look at Web3 or Metaverse, how do you trust what is in the Metaverse? How do you trust what is in the digital world? When you can solve for this, you open up things that happen at the speed of light versus the physical movement of goods and services.
Yes, Sunil, one question I think I would like to ask is like, when you recruit
Yes.
for your company, or what are the different traits you're looking for in a candidate, especially for maybe a tech startup, or you've been involved in many of these startups. So what are the things that are important, which they should be good at?
There are two types of skills that we look for. Okay. So obviously the hard skills that you go to a school, you get expertise in coding, or you can get expertise in supply chain, right? Those are the tangible skills that schools generally teach, right? Those are important. Those are entry tickets to get in, right? So you know what you're supposed to do. Okay, that's important, right? And if you're really good at that and you can demonstrate that with grades and etc., that is good, right? But even more important than is your soft skills. The soft skills are how you actually interact with other people. What's your attitude that you bring to work? Are you somebody who is motivated, who works hard, right? Are you somebody who is willing to learn, is coachable, right? Because at least when I graduated, I said, oh, I'm done with learning, right? Yeah. Now I can start working, right? I don't have to learn, right? The reality is, if you want to go far, then you have to be a lifelong learner. So people who are curious, who has an attitude of wanting to learn and do the right things, and can work well in teams, and they understand some of the communication skills, those get valued much more, especially over time.
Okay, and how do you, like, there's a stream of technical people and there's business people, right? So many of you guys will be more on the business side, and some of you who are the MIS. How many MIS students are here? Mostly of supply chain. I thought there was a group. There's an MIS section too, so some people register underneath that. Okay, so mostly supply chain in this class, but when you have those two different streams of people who are coming in, how do you train the other folks? Which one is easily transferable skills? I mean, do you want some level of technical knowledge and then process knowledge, or how do you balance that?
So I used to run a program prior to this. I ran a company in training companies, employees, and hiring employees for companies and training them for some of the large consulting companies. And we ran a program and we have trained thousands of people worldwide. And we train people from all kinds of backgrounds, people with masters, with PhDs, with bachelors, with no degrees. Okay? People who are re-entering after 10, 20 years working in retail or other jobs. And now they want to learn a hard skill like a Java coding or something, right? The number one characteristic is we are seen as willingness to learn. Willingness to apply is anybody can learn anything. If they are decently smart enough, they can learn anything, right? But that willingness to apply themselves, that's usually where people make it or break it. And the schools like the Jindal School of Management give you a leg up. You get an advantage. You learn a lot here that others don't know, right? If you can take that and build on it, and you can go much further, much faster than somebody who has to go learn this in the school of hard knocks.
Excellent. What other questions? Anybody else? Yes.
So, what is the ideal job role of a supply chain intern that works at the professor's firm?
For Copperwire systems?
Like an ideal job profile of, let's consider a supply chain intern or a supply chain associate. If professor hires somebody like that, what would be his ideal job profile?
What would be the ideal job profile, Sunil, for your company?
So we are a software company, right? So we are a software company that provides an infrastructure for people to use within supply chains or other type of blockchain applications, right? So for us, the type of people that we need are people who can develop applications, right? Full stack developers, people who can sell, right? People who can market, right? So sales, marketing, business development, customer support, and development, those are the type of roles we have inside a software company, right? Now, if you went to a manufacturing supply chain, then depending on the type of role in that manufacturing supply chain, it could be somebody processing information, somebody taking the information and synthesizing it, doing analysis, right? It could be working with spreadsheets, working with more sophisticated tools like Tableau, right? But they are either acting on something and doing something on this actual shop floor or supply chain, or taking the information and synthesizing it for people to make good quality decisions out of it, right? The quality of the decisions matter, because if you make the wrong decision, you might be, depending on if you're in healthcare, you might be putting people's lives at risk, right? If in airline, manufacturing, and certain industries that are mission critical, then you want to make sure that nobody's lives are at risk because somebody put faulty equipment into the place, right? In other industries, it's making sure the flow. Supply chain is one of those interesting things where nobody knows about supply chain if things are working well, right? When something breaks, then everybody knows supply chain is the problem, right? So communication skills are important. Coordination skills are important. Project management skills are important.
Yes, Sunil, another technical related question which I was thinking about was, you talked about the, how much we trust a product, because of the data, we have and all that. So certain products are going to be more valued compared to the other products, which doesn't, because they didn't have, probably it was exposed to different temperature. Vaccine, we lost 3,000 vials of vaccine in California last year because the temperature went down and they had to throw away all the stuff. So certain things are very highly visible and we can do it. Certain other products, once we know it, we will say, well, that's a low grade product. So don't you think there will be an evolution of standards that are going to come up, which will dictate, hey, these are the products of high quality, right? Based on what we know about that product. So standards are going to be probably redefined. in terms of what we know about this product.
Yes.
You agree with that?
Yeah, standards get redefined. Sometimes it's a battle between the fakes and the real, right? The companies that make the high quality products, many of the tools and equipment that they have, the counterfeiters also have access to the same thing, right? So you have to constantly evolve and stay ahead of the counterfeit so that your product maintains a higher level of standard and consistency over time in order to preserve the brand value.
So if that is the case, then what will happen to the so-called luxury brands today? Because many of these luxury brands are actually made in other countries, and who knows what, right? What goes into that product? But because of the brand name, it is being sold. Now, once this information comes out of that product, there will be a new luxury brand that is going to be emerged, which will really say this is the right product, which is of good quality.
And that happens, and you have knockoff brands that come along, right? You have good enough brands that come along. So, for example, Costco was affordable luxury. Okay, Kirkland does things on their own, under their control, private labeled, but the brands might have a brand premium. Okay? So there are differences between. So, end of the day, what's a brand, right? You believe in that brand because they deliver on the brand promise consistently. So that consistency and quality has a premium. Now the industry may change, the value for premium might shift from one to the other. So you have to constantly be on the cutting edge of innovation to keep evolving that up further. So like the mattress brand that we talked about, they're investing in this technology to not only show the trust and provenance for them, they're also moving the needle for the industry as a whole. So say, follow me rather than follow somebody else, right? So they're kind of stepping up and moving the needle forward.
I mean, if you think about automotive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Tesla, right?
Yes.
Everybody likes Tesla in this room. How many people would like to buy a Tesla? Okay. How many people would like to buy a Toyota? Okay.
They're reliable.
Which one? Toyotas. Okay.
Yeah, they're pretty.
But Tesla, everybody knows, right? I don't think anybody in this room doesn't know about Tesla. And I think a lot of you generation would like to have a Tesla. There's that feeling out there. It's a cool car to drive around. But the point I'm trying to say is, I'm not sure about this segment here, a little different in the response I'm getting. But generally, I hear that they want to Tesla. Everybody likes when we brought Tesla here for a drive. Everybody was jumping in, trying to get a drive on it last semester. So if you look at the quality of that brand, right? Have anybody looked at the Tesla's quality issues?
Yeah, it's not that.
It's the worst
Yeah.
out of all the automotive brands. So and now the car is actually selling at a premium. It went up $8,000 in the last 6 months. So look at what we perceived as quality with Toyota has changed into what is available from Tesla. Consumers have shifted their preference because what is considered as quality today is technology inside the vehicle. It's not really about the rideability, the ride and handling. During the days when Sunil and I bought a car, we would like to drive the car around and see how comfortable the steering is. How do we get the feel for it? Is it giving me the road shocks on the steering? Many things, right? And even the comfort inside the vehicle. Look at the box we have with Tesla. I mean, I'm not criticizing the vehicle, but there's not much inside the car. I mean, all you have is a battery, right? And then all these technology features inside, and that appeals to a lot of customers. So I mean, that's the shift we are going through. I mean, I found it to be very interesting. There's a huge shift in terms of, and their backlog in terms of, and you know what? Tesla is actually the highest market valued company within the automotive sector. In fact, they are the combination of all the automotive companies combined. It's about $900 billion. So you can imagine how much shift that has already happened. And to Sunil's point, I mean, it's changing. I mean, it's perception. I have a feeling that, once the people know more about the product itself, they will probably change all this ESG and other things coming in. they will change their preference from, hey, you call it a brand, luxury brand. I don't consider that as a luxury brand. I think this is the brand. This product is what I consider as my top brand. There might be a complete shift in the branding itself. I may be wrong, but I'm just thinking that might happen.
Now, marketing is about impressions and ability to shape the consumer's mind, right? So last month, my brother-in-law called me and said, hey, I'm looking at this new SUV/minivan, it's all electric, from this company called VinFast. I said, I never heard of this company before. Okay. So I said, okay, where is this company from? So I went and started looking at it, VinFastAuto.us. Okay. They launched this vehicle in January at CES. And there are two vehicles they launched. One is a 7-seater, other one is a 5-seater SUV. Okay. Electric vehicle with 400 miles of range or something equivalent. When I started looking at the car, the dimensions of the car was pretty close to my Toyota Sienna, like just an inch and a half short. Okay? It's so one of the reasons I still have my old Sienna is because that's the only car that's comfortable enough for my old mother-in-law and my young son to sit in the middle seats. Okay, my other cars like the BMWs and others, they're not that comfortable in the back seat. So for a family segment, this car was the first one that actually offered a 7-seater, which is spacious enough. Okay, that was the first thing I observed. The second thing I observed was they were pricing it at $56,000 versus the Tesla's Model X was $100,000, $90,000, $100,000. So when I started looking at it, realized that they were actually pricing at $56,000, but they were leasing the battery out. Okay, so they lowered the price by about 30% by offering the battery on a perennial lease. So you don't have to worry about the battery replacement, which could be significant part of the cost of the vehicle 5, 6, 7 years in the future. Okay. So that's kind of innovative. The other innovation I saw was they were actually tracking all the information on a blockchain. They were probably the first manufacturer that I saw that are using information on blockchain. And then they went and added an NFT capability to the first several thousand buyers in the first 90 days or so. So if you buy this vehicle, here are some bonus rewards. 7-day vacation in Vietnam. It's a Vietnamese manufacturer. It's the largest company in Vietnam by market cap. And 7-day vacation in Vietnam, plus a few other gifts, $5,000 or the price, etc., etc. Okay, and you look at it; it is designed by Pininfarina and manufactured by this company that did not make automobiles until 2018. And the last 3 years, they come out of nowhere and become the largest automobile manufacturer in Vietnam, and now they're coming to America. So, with all that data that I learned, do you think that company has a chance when there are 56 electric vehicle manufacturers ahead of them?
No? Why? Just out of curiosity, what you're thinking is.
There was somebody ahead of them, so it's like.
Too many players in the market.
Yeah, the competition is very saturated. I mean, unless they have like one thing in particular that really sets them apart, that's like really competitive. It's not really. They'll get squashed.
What do you think, Sunil?
Don't know. 20,000 people put up $200 deposit within 24 or 48 hours. So the 20,000 plus people who think differently, and given the cost structure is much lower in Vietnam, that's enough for them to be successful. It took many years before Tesla reached a level where they could actually sell that many cars. And the total market penetration for electric cars is still around only 1% or so. So there's a lot of opportunity ahead. They may or may not be successful. They may not be able to capture the brand imagination. But now there are 80 more people who heard the story from me.
Excellent. Any other questions for Sunil? I know that it's about 8:30, more than what Sunil had planned for, I'm sure.
I'm good. I'm still got.
Any other questions anybody has got about anything? Can be other things too. Yes.
Yeah, my question is, I'm an MBA student, so I don't have many technical skills. I definitely, I guess we specialize more on the soft skills type of area, but the reason I'm taking the SAP course is so that I can work on technical skills. Are there any technical skills or systems that you recommend I get exposure or become familiar with so that I can be competitive?
So there are a couple of things I'll answer slightly differently, right? So prior to taking your MBA, what did you study?
I did biochemistry and undergraduate.
Okay. Biochemistry is a lot more technical than I can understand. Right? So there's a lot of things that you have to study that are technical in nature. Okay? So just don't confuse software as technology or hardware as technology. You have to learn many things around information, and technical stuff exists in all industries. Finance, marketing, digital marketing is pretty technical to begin with, right? But that does not necessarily mean that's the right fit for you, right? You have to figure out what you're good at, and you have to figure out where the opportunities are. So being technical is one, but you might be a go-getter who might be a what we call an A-type person, and you might be somebody who might be relationship-oriented, which means that you might have a different type of job that is ideally suitable to you, right? Or you might be analytical in nature, so you might be in a different type of job. So if you do a DISC assessment or any kind of STAR assessment or something like that, you will figure out what is ideal for you, what makes you happy, and then you can figure out, yeah, I mean, knowing technology is good, being able to apply it to something that has demand in the marketplace like SAP or analytics or something, that's good. But if you know yourself, you'll be able to find the job opportunities, business opportunities that make you really shine.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good question. Anybody else? Okay, so Sunil, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us in such short notice. I mean, when I talked to him yesterday, I didn't know that he was going to make it today, but Sunil said, hey, tomorrow looks good. I mean, it was a great opportunity to get that going, and I'm sure all of you know more about blockchain than 2 hours ago. And,
Thank you.
And definitely I learned a lot from you, what you presented, Sunil. In fact, I'll be talking with you more about it because I have a few other thoughts on the some of the things you discussed there. And so thank you so much. And we're going to go on a break here for about 10-15 minutes, and then we will continue with the class. So Sunil, again, thank you. And I know that you have a meeting at 9 o'clock. So
thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Ramesh. And if any of you find this area interesting or can think of applications of blockchain, then that's an internship offer for anybody.
okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye now.